Hi, everyone. I'm Brittany. Welcome to Randomness, where we talk about a little bit of everything, the deep, the weird, and the real. So take a breath, open your mind, and let's get into it. Okay. I want to start today by just sitting with something for a second because this episode is one I have been thinking about for a while, and I really want to do it justice. There is a specific kind of heartbreak that I think is the most confusing, the most disorienting, and honestly, the least talked about in an honest way. And, well, it's breaking up with someone you are still completely, genuinely in love with, not because anything went wrong, not because someone hurt you, not because the love ran out, but because you want different things, because the paths you are each walking are pulling you in opposite directions. And staying together would mean one or both of you slowly giving up something essential about who you are or who you are becoming. If you have been through this, you know that there is almost no way to explain it to someone who hasn't. Because from the outside, it can look like a choice. And technically, yes, it is. But it doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like an amputation. So today we are going to talk about it. All of it. Why this happens, why it's so hard, what the grief looks like, and how you actually begin to find your way through it. Let's start with the thing that makes this so painful, which is the belief, one that I think most of us carry somewhere deep, that love should be enough. That if two people love each other enough, they can figure it out. That love conquers all. That where there's a will, there's a way. And I understand why we believe that. It's in every love song, every movie, every story we've ever been told about romance. The message is love wins. So when love doesn't win, when you love someone and it still doesn't work, it can feel like a personal failure, like you didn't try hard enough, like the love wasn't real enough. But here's what I want to offer instead. Love and compatibility are not the same thing. And the absence of compatibility is not the absence of love. You can love someone deeply, authentically, with your whole heart, and still not be right for each other in the context of life. Love tells you how you feel about a person. Compatibility tells you whether the life you built together is actually livable for both of you. And when those two things don't line up, when you love each other, but the lives you need are genuinely different, that is not a failure of love. That is just one of the most painful truths that love sometimes delivers. Now, I want to get specific here because I think we are on different paths, can sometimes get used as a vague sort of way of avoiding a harder conversation. But when it's real, when the path difference is genuine, it's worth naming what actually looks like. It looks like one person knowing in their heart, in their bones, that they want children, and the other knowing just as clearly that they don't. And both of those positions being completely valid and completely incompatible. It looks like one person's life calling them to a different city, a different country, a different way of living, and the other being rooted somewhere in a way that is just as real and just as important. It looks like deeply different versions of what a life should look like, how it's structured, how it's spent, what it's built around, and realizing that both versions are legitimate. They just don't fit together. It looks like being at different stages. One person ready to build something settled and rooted, the other still in the middle of becoming, needing room to move and change and figure themselves out. It could look like faith or values or fundamental ways of seeing the world that matter deeply to both people and that can be respected, even celebrated, but that create a quiet incompatibility that doesn't go away no matter how much love is present. And none of these are anyone's fault. That's the thing. When the path difference is real, there's usually no villain in the story. There's just two people who love each other and are honest enough to admit that love isn't the only thing a relationship needs to survive. Now, I want to be fair here because I think it's important to name that most path differences are worth a real honest conversation before anyone walks away. Some things that feel like deal breakers are actually about fear or timing or assumptions that haven't been tested yet. And couples who communicate well can sometimes find a third path, something neither person originally imagined that actually works. So I'm not saying the moment you notice a difference, you leave. What I'm saying is that there's a point, and you usually know it when you arrive there, where the honest answer to can this work is no, not no unless we change everything about ourselves, not no unless one of us gives up something core to who we are. Just no. That's the moment I'm talking about today. And I think one of the hardest parts of being in this moment is the negotiation that happens internally between the two of you, where you try to find a way out of the impossible, where you think, maybe I could compromise on this. Maybe it would be okay. Maybe I want this less than I think I do. And that negotiation is natural. It comes from love, but there is a point where compromise stops being compromise and starts being self-erasure. When you're not meeting in the middle, you're quietly abandoning something you need. And that kind of sacrifice, the kind that asks you to be fundamentally less yourself, it doesn't tend to hold. It builds resentment. It creates a grief that lives inside the relationship instead of outside it. The kindest thing, the hardest thing, most loving thing is sometimes to stop negotiating and tell the truth. If you've made that decision, or if it's been made for you, I want to talk about what the grief of this specific kind of loss feels like, because it's different from other breakups in some important ways. First, there's no clean story to tell yourself. With other breakups, there's usually a narrative. They hurt me. We grew apart. It was toxic. I outgrew it. And those narratives are painful, but they give you something to hold on to. They give the ending a shape. With this kind of ending, the narrative is we loved each other and it still didn't work, which is a much harder story to carry because it doesn't resolve into anything simple. Second, you might grieve the person while also knowing the decision was right. And that combination, clarity and grief existing at the same time, is deeply disorienting. We expect clarity to feel like relief, and sometimes it does, but clarity about a hard decision doesn't erase the pain of it. You can know something is right and still be devastated by it. Both things are true simultaneously, and that's exhausting. Third, the love doesn't turn off. This might be the hardest part. You might still love this person after the breakup. You might love them for a long time. And because the ending wasn't caused by something they did, there's nothing to be angry at, nothing to protect yourself with. It's just love with nowhere to go. And that is one of the loneliest feelings there is. And I have to talk about this because I think it's one of the most real parts of this experience. When you break up with someone you still love, the pull to go back is so very strong because all the reasons you left are about the future, about incompatibility, about paths and choices and lives that haven't been lived yet. But all the reasons to go back are right in front of you. The familiarity, the comfort, the love that's still real and still there. And so the logic of going back can feel very convincing in the short term because you're comparing a concrete felt experience, the love you have right now, against an abstract, future-oriented reality, the ways you would eventually lose each other if you stayed. And this is why so many couples in this situation cycle back together, sometimes multiple times, not because they're weak or foolish, but because the love is real and the future is uncertain and the pain of the present is so acute that almost anything feels better than sitting in it. But what usually happens when you go back, if the path difference is genuinely real, is that you end up in the same place again, only now with more history, more grief, more of yourselves tangled up in something that still doesn't have a future. The path difference doesn't resolve because the love is still there. It just waits. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for both of you is to not go back, to let the ending be the ending. Okay, so how do you actually survive this? Because I don't want to just describe the pain without giving you something to hold on to. Let yourself grieve it like the real loss it is. This is not a small thing. Don't let anyone, including yourself, minimize it by pointing out that no one died or that you'll find someone else or that it was the right decision. Right decisions can still be devastating. So grieve it fully. Stop trying to make sense right away. There's a very human urge to need the ending to mean something immediately, to extract the lesson, to find the silver lining, to turn it into a story with a tidy conclusion. But grief doesn't move on a timeline that accommodates our need for resolution. Sometimes you just have to be in the not knowing for a while. So maybe create distance, at least for now. And I know this one is hard, but staying in close contact with someone you love, it makes it so much harder for the grief to do its work. Loving someone from a distance is sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both of you while you heal. Resist the urge to rewrite the relationship. You don't have to decide the relationship was a mistake in order to move on from it. You don't have to make them a villain or yourself a fool. You can hold it as something real and true and good that also couldn't continue. That is a complete story. And let yourself believe that this is survivable because it is. It doesn't feel like it in the beginning, but love lost to incompatibility as opposed to love lost to betrayal tends to carry within it a kind of calmness or cleanness over time. You know, you can look back without bitterness. You can wish them well and mean it. You can love them softly from a distance without that love destroying you. That version of yourself is coming. You just have to get through the in-between. So what remains when a love like this ends? Well, you carry it with you. The love, the memories, the person you became in the context of that relationship. None of that disappears. It becomes part of the architecture of who you are. And here's what I believe. Maybe more than anything else I've said today. A love that ends because two people were honest about who they are and what they need. That is not a failed love. That is actually love working exactly as it should. Love that respects the other person enough to tell the truth. Love that cares more about their wholeness than about its own survival. That's not a consolation prize. That's one of the most profound things love can do. You loved someone well enough to let them go, and that matters. That counts. And someday, when the grief has had its time or had the time it needs, I think you'll be able to feel that. Not just know it, but actually feel it as one of the most important things you've ever done. Yeah. Okay, well, that's today's episode. Thank you so much for being here for this one. It's kind of a tender topic, and I hope it met you where you are. And if this one resonated, please share it. There are so many people sitting quietly with this exact kind of heartbreak and feeling like no one quite understands it. But before I let you go, remember, loving someone and letting them go are not opposites. Sometimes letting go is the deepest form of love there is. And remember, a relationship that ended doesn't mean a love failed. You can have loved beautifully and still not been built for that same life. And remember, the right path for you still exists. And choosing it, even when it costs you every day, is one of the bravest things you will ever do. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow. And remember, keep your energy grounded, your mind open, and your curiosity alive.